Hey everybody, welcome to this video. My name is Chris Harris, a certified financial planner, and today I'm going to be talking about why it's important to have a financial plan. And as a disclaimer, this video is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered tax, legal, or investment advice. Okay, so you've probably heard of a financial plan before, or maybe you haven't, or maybe you don't understand what it is. And so I'm going to just hopefully clear that up of what makes a good financial plan. With AI and all the technology we have nowadays, people think that, just by asking, whether it's chat or whatever, a question, they don't need financial planning. And so I'm going to show you what financial planning, kind of the meat of financial planning, and really where it becomes a powerful tool for your financial picture. Okay. So let's dive into this. So financial planning. So we're going to talk about what financial planning is first. And so if I can just illustrate this here on this chart or this whiteboard here. So we have financial plan. Here, let me move this down a little bit more. So we have financial plan. What does it consist of? So there's different areas of financial planning that we want to make sure we cover. And the first one, and this is probably the more obvious one, is retirement planning, okay? So we want to prepare ourselves for retirement, right? Super important. How do we get there? How much do we need to start saving? What kind of accounts do we have? How are we going to reach or attain our goals, right? The next one that we want to look at is estate planning. Okay. So this one is not just for the uber wealthy, and I get that all the time. Well, I don't have enough assets. Do I really need an estate plan? And the answer is yes, because you want to, whether it's avoid probate or you want to make sure your assets get, passed down to the right person. This can get very, very tricky, and oftentimes, depending on how complex it is, it needs to be ran through, an estate lawyer. But this is something that's very important to look at and make sure accounts are labeled appropriately, things of that nature. So very, very important, and something that you definitely don't want to overlook, even if you don't feel like you have a big enough estate. Also, we want to look at risk management. So think of insurance, life insurance, also home insurance, auto insurance, all those different insurance, the things that we try to do to mitigate risk. And this one's kind of a tricky one, because you probably have seen, financial, advisors or planners or whatever that just sell insurance, right? It's like, well, I don't need insurance. I already have insurance. That's great. But you definitely want to review your policies to make sure that it aligns with your goals, right? You also could be overinsured, right? So it goes both ways. Maybe you're like, oh, I don't want to, get life insurance, or maybe I want to get some. Maybe I already have some because my neighbor or whatever, my friend's friend sold me a policy or whatever that is. You just want to look at the policies, make sure you understand it, and make sure you actually need the policy. I've had clients where they come to me, we review their insurance policies, and sometimes it's overkill, and we say, hey, you know what, maybe we don't need this many policies. Let's get rid of some because we already have assets and things in place. We run the analysis on it, and it actually ends up saving the client some money, right? Some cash flow. So let's look at, also, we are going to take a look. So we have retirement planning, estate planning, risk management, and then we also have tax planning. Okay, which is really important, and it overlaps in every one of these areas. Okay, so we want to, again, look at, if we're talking about retirement planning, for example, there's some overlap here where, we're going to talk about what type of accounts we're going to withdraw in retirement. So if we're building up a certain account, whether this is a tax advantage account or, just a regular brokerage account or whatever it is, how is that going to be distributed in retirement years, and how can that affect Social Security, IRMA surcharges, and so on and so forth, right? And so we want to make sure that we're prepared for those situations. And then even current tax planning. So we're looking at whether you own a business or you just have a W-2, we're looking at ways and efficiencies so that we can reduce tax liability if possible, whether it's through charitable giving or maybe it's other tax strategies with tax loss harvesting and things of that nature. So, and then the last one that we talk about is investment. Investment management. Okay, so we have investment management. So you can think of your portfolio, right? Asset allocation, your risk tolerance, all of those things that are going to help hopefully spur your growth engine so that you can actually retire when you project to retire. So, and that's going to again have a lot of overlap into these other areas, right? So again, while AI is nice, right, where we can ask it questions, what should I do, with this or whatever, and it can populate some sort of an answer. The real miss is that it's not connecting all of this information, right? It's not connecting at all. And that can be a very, very big miscalculation on the part of the individual, right? And so you want to make sure that when you have a financial plan, you're really covered in all of these areas. And so you understand your whole financial picture, right? So this makes up a really good, solid financial plan. And within these, you're going to have subcategories that get more granular, right? But so where do we start? Where do we start with a financial plan? And again, I think this is something that a lot of folks just don't understand because it is sometimes is a foreign language. But even when it comes to portfolio management, investment management, I think a lot of people they forget to understand a few common or I guess important just basics, right? So if we look at your time horizon is a very important thing to look at when you're talking about financial planning, and then also your risk tolerance. Okay, and these two things are very important, and again, often overlooked. In just if you don't have a financial plan, your time horizon is time to not only retirement, because we think, well, the questions we ask that pertain to time horizon, a lot of responses are directly tied to retirement because that's what we think of, right? But it's also, so we want to obviously know or project when we can retire. But then also, we want to project our death, right? And that's kind of a morbid way to put it, but it's a big deal for how long we live, because if we don't put that in or kind of come up with some projections, then we could definitely outlive our assets, and then we're really going to be, up a creek without a paddle. So we want to make sure that we understand our retirement age is when we're trying to get there, and then also our death, right? And we get that based off of ancestors and things like that, parents, grandparents, things like that. That can kind of give us a guesstimation of how long we think we'll live, but we tend to be more conservative so that, again, we're not outliving our assets. So this is a big one that I think a lot of people just don't even pay attention to, when in reality it makes a big difference, when it comes to your financial plan. Risk tolerance. So this one is also one that I think most just casual investors, they don't think about, because it's something that, you don't think about, right? And so you think about your risk tolerance is how much risk, oh, that's not how you spell, how much risk can I handle? Okay. Now we do this through questionnaires and just conversations with our clients, but this is understanding how much risk you can actually take on. How much can you handle from a behavioral or emotional standpoint, right? And that is going to affect how you invest, how your portfolio is allocated, things like that. And then also, in addition to both of these, so your time horizon and your risk tolerance will help, and I mentioned this already, with how you're going to do your asset allocation, okay, which is something that's also overlooked. Again, with the casual investor that just, hey, I'm going to put money in the market and I'm good, right? But this is going to be someday, hopefully, this account will be, or your retirement accounts, whatever, your accounts, your portfolios that you've been building will hopefully be able to generate income in retirement. Okay. So it becomes a little bit more technical at that point, right? We're trying to understand how much income we can get from the allocation that we have. We still hopefully can, work for kind of a growth, outpacing inflation type of deal. But then we're also needing income. We don't want to deplete our portfolio. So we're looking at hopefully, again, potentially a growth component to it. So this one can get to be very, very important in retirement. And even before retirement, right? So how do we get there? Well, maybe we're too conservative early on and we didn't have our portfolio grown up because we were too nervous. Or, maybe we were all invested into one specific stock for our, most of our accumulation phase years or earning years. And maybe that stock went belly up. So now our whole portfolio is gone, right? So maybe it's a kind of a crypto kind of deal there or something, it doesn't matter. But the point I'm trying to make is that these things are very, very important, especially early on, not just in retirement years, to understand so that you can be prepared for when you walk into your retirement years feeling confident and comfortable with what you've built. Okay. All right. So let's dive into. We're going to dive into what an actual plan looks like, okay? Because I think it's important to illustrate, again, we talk about financial planning, but I'm going to show you exactly what it looks like so that you can actually see and kind of feel it. This is a sample client, Chris P. Bacon and Marsha Mello. So what we do is we gather information on Chris P. He's age 55. Marsha Mello, she's 55. We got their birth date. Their retirement age, 65. Life expectancy is 100 for both. Again, these can change. Retirement age can change, and based off the modeling, what the goals, things like that, they might have to be maneuvered. But what we're talking about right here is what's called the base case. This is where we're at today. And if you think about a financial plan, think about it as something that can evolve and change over time, right? And if we plan good enough, then hopefully over time that plan morphs into more of a reality for you in retirement, right? And even beyond, right? Whether that's estate planning or, legacy planning, that type of stuff. So we go over your financial priorities, right? This is really where it starts to become, the build out of a financial plan is understanding your priorities. So what is it that you're trying to accomplish? Retirement planning, managing a budget, investment management, minimizing taxes, providing a legacy. Maybe you have elderly parents that you're going to have to take care of, whatever it is, right? There's so many different areas or priorities that folks have, and everybody's different. That's why one, plan doesn't work for everybody. Then we go over your goals. Okay, so you want to retire at 65. You're going to need $135,000 to live off per year, or whatever that number looks like for you. Maybe you want to go travel more. You want to, have a big enough pot at the end that you can have your, kids have a huge inheritance, or it can be whatever it is that you are trying to accomplish during your life and in retirement. So these goals are really, really important, and most people have come to find out don't even have goals. They don't even know what they want to do in retirement. A lot of people just hold their breath and say, well, I'm hoping it all works out in retirement, right? And that can be a very anxious way to live. So then what you want to do is you want to identify their net worth. So we look at all their assets, right? So we look at your 401k, your 403b, all of this, how much we have in these accounts. We have vacation home, we have cars, jewelry, whatever it is, right? So we want to take all of your assets, all of your liabilities. We have a mortgage on the home, we have credit card of debt here, $3,600. So we look at the total net worth from that. So this example for this client is 3.8 million, is the value of all this minus the liabilities. So we kind of start creating the picture of their net worth. Now we look at income. So Chris P. Bacon is earning $300,000 per year. Marsha, she has a part-time job of $50,000 per year. And with this, we are able to then estimate our Social Security. So we're able to come in here and say, hey, based off of the current strategy, when is the best time to take Social Security? And I did another video on this, so you can watch that if you have more questions or want to go deeper into Social Security. But it really gives us an analysis of, okay, based off of current assumptions, when is the best time to take Social Security? And as a spoiler alert, it's not always what you may think it is, okay? So we look at Social Security, if you have any pension or things like that. So we put it all into one place to understand how much you're actually generating. We look at expenses and taxes. So we have current living expenses, retirement living expenses, so those can change. And then we have, different liability payments that we're making, whether it's on a mortgage or whatnot. So we will actually go in and put the mortgage in at whatever rate. So really getting granular on this. We'll go over insurance premiums and then tax assumptions depending on what state you live in. We use also a tax analyzer in addition to get nitty-gritty on the tax side of things as well. Okay. Savings and contributions. So this is where we go through the 401k or any other savings accounts that we have. So we'll put the match in from the employer and the employee. And really becomes, an important piece to understand how much you're actually putting away for your retirement. And this is where we see a lot of folks that don't actually know how much their employer is contributing to their 401k or how much they're contributing to their 401k. So it really kind of irons some of this stuff out and really helps us to identify how much we are contributing and how much more potentially we could to get the full employer match, okay? And so if you have other accounts that you're investing into, that type of thing, we're gonna put that there, okay? Allocation and protection, we talked about this a little bit as well, so just understanding the current allocation of where you're at, and this could be, it could be a little bit more conservative, more, aggressive than what we would like to see. So that will be, a suggestion that we could potentially make depending on the plan and how it's, how it's looking. Protection. So we have our insurance policies, disability, things like that. So everything that we have in terms of, protection on the family is going to come into this module. Okay. So after we've gathered all of this data, I know it seems pretty overwhelming, but the nice thing about a financial plan is, again, it brings all of your financial life into one picture. Okay. So it's a little bit of a tedious task, I guess you could say, to get it set up. But once you're there, it becomes a really cool tool. So we can actually come into here and we can start to use modeling. And this is the power of financial planning, because we can take the current scenario that we have, and we can say, based off of this base case, like we called it before, so our current scenario is our base case, we can identify if we have enough assets to fulfill what we're trying to fulfill, our goals, right? We can come into here and run a Monte Carlo simulation. Now, if you're not familiar with the Monte Carlo simulation, this is something that takes 1,000 randomly generated market scenarios and it gives you a probability of success. Okay. I know there's some practitioners that are against the Monte Carlo summary. I like to use both cash flow analysis and Monte Carlo to see how that lines up. And so I think it's good to run a few different analyses as well as some stress tests on the portfolio to really see how the portfolio would react. But this gives us an idea of where we're at in terms of success with the current situation that we find ourselves in, okay? So if we look down here, we can actually see the median, so the 50 percentile, we would end in this scenario with crispy bacon and marshmallow, would end with 8.2 million assets. And then on the upside capture, so this is probably less likely, but it's still a possibility. They're going to end with 12.5%. The downside of this, so again, probably not very likely, but it very well could happen. 5.4 million in assets that they would end with. So in all of these different scenarios, these 1,000 randomly, generated market scenarios, the portfolio seems to be holding up pretty well, right? Now, what we want to do is we want to keep this probability of success. You're probably thinking, well, how do I get to 100? We want to keep this with, something that we're not too conservative with. So if we're hitting 100%, then we could be a little bit too conservative with our portfolios, right? Not just necessarily the asset allocation, but in terms of spending or, building wealth, different investments, other asset accumulation. So it just kind of gives us the ability to say, well, maybe we can take a little bit more risk in trying to generate more wealth, right? So there's a fine balance there. We can also generate some different scenarios that will show different techniques that we can use that can potentially be beneficial so that we can maximize either spending in retirement or giving it to charity or whatever it is. So for example, if we were to use, so this is just some different techniques that we could use. If we utilize a Roth conversion to a 10% bracket from 2036 to 2045, I have another video on this one as well for doing a Roth conversion and how that can affect your taxes. But if we were to do a Roth conversion for, that time period, 2036 to 2045, that can have an impact on income taxes, right? But then also give us more tax-free growth later on in retirement. If we started Social Security at full retirement age, as opposed to, 62 when we can first start taking it, or even at 70, which is the latest delay, age that we can take Social Security. So how does that affect our portfolio? Making annual contributions, retiring early, so on and so forth, right? So increasing your retirement lifestyle. Those type of things are going to be really important to look at, and we can actually come to here, look at the lifetime portfolio value, and you can see by doing these techniques, we are actually going to see a decrease in assets. So we're going to lose over the course of our retirement years, $1.5 million. Again, this is linear. These are linear projections. We can actually come in here and show a different model showing about a 50%, an average market, I guess. So 50% trial runs here. So as you can see how it moves, we generate decent amount of portfolio assets. And we can go through and we can toggle on and off some of these to see how, it would affect our retirement. And it's really going to answer some of those questions that maybe have been itching at us of like, can I retire, right? Or should I retire? Or when should I start taking Social Security? Some of the basic ones. But that really gives some depth and some real analysis to the financial plan. And it also gives that kind of comfort, right? That peace of mind of knowing, hey, I have a plan in place. And this becomes especially powerful as we look at market scenarios or the market as we have different geopolitical events, or we have like we had last year with tariffs or the Iran war or conflict going on. You're able to then look at your portfolio, understanding a level of planning that has been done that you know, oh, like I'm still based off of our plan going in the right direction, even though the market had, you know, a downturn of 5, 10, whatever percent. I know that I'm on track based off of, you know, our plan, right, that we've created. So it does become a thing where I think we are able to not worry as much because we have a plan put in place. Gives you kind of that sense of you know, comfort, of peace, those type of things, which is very, I think, as you look at the market, it becomes a very emotional thing. And as you look at a financial plan, I think it helps to deal with the emotional side of investing. So this becomes very important. We can drill down into the portfolio assets. We can look at these reports, and there's reports for days, but we can really identify and compare against other scenarios that we run to see really where our you know, our assets are going, how much we're spending, what does that look like in retirement, and we can actually see the, you know, the cash flow statement that will show. We can actually drill down into some of these to show where the breakout is for our spending, our income, distributions, all of that, right? So again, becomes a very, very powerful tool, and we can get very granular with that as well. We can create multiple scenarios, and again, this is something that becomes more part of, you know, a continual process and not just a one and done, because again, the more you plan and the more things change, that financial plan hopefully gets more and more solidified as you get closer to your retirement years, and then even from your retirement on, right? So you're still planning, you're still understanding, you know, kind of how your plan's working, and if things need to change, you can make those changes, and we can continue, you know, to model out and modify. Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed that video, or this video. Please join me next time. Feel free to reach out with any questions. Thanks for watching.